I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Today on CityCast Denver, something has gone very wrong inside Denver's fire department. A vast majority of firefighters want their chief gone, but the mayor's sticking up for him. And it's not totally clear what they're actually disagreeing about. CBS Colorado's Brian Moss has been investigating the inner workings of the fire department, and he's on with me today to talk about what went wrong and what comes next. Today is Monday, March 24th. I'm Paul Caroli, and here's what Denver's talking about. Brian Moss, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Thanks for having me, Paul. It's great to be here.
So of all the city services you could have investigated, you decided on the fire department.
I don't know if I decided on the fire department. I think the fire department decided on me.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of this goes back a couple of years when I started hearing some things, and one thing leads to another with a reporter, and that's why I've spent a lot of time in the last year and a half on the Denver Fire Department.
Well, this is kind of one of my pet passion projects to understand this department better. But I guess we should probably start at the beginning, back when you first started hearing those inklings of some kind of story brewing. What was happening?
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I think it might have been in 2023 or 2024, I actually had lunch with a firefighter who I know and shared some documents with me, some concerns about the fire chief and comp time and things like that. And I took the records and I couldn't really make much out of them at the time. But as I spent more time with these records, I started to see some things in them that weren't really what he was focused on. But I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. And it involved the chief and the upper command staff charging for comp time for going to events that most people would consider just to be part of the job. I mean, the chief makes $250,000 a year, but he was billing for comp time for going to retirement parties, going to fire station dinners, going to community events on the weekend. And those are all the kinds of things that a lot of people would consider to be part of the job.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, because as taxpayers, that's our money going to this person for attending events. He's basically giving himself a raise.
Essentially, that's the way you can look at it. In fact, a lot of firefighters have said to me they thought that this was theft because what we found out in the course of our investigation was that the chief and his top command staff were regularly awarding themselves comp time for these events that they went to that were really routine and mundane. I mean, ceremonies. What really got under the skin of firefighters was when we reported on them billing comp time for going to memorials for fallen firefighters. That really angered firefighters who do not look at those as being money-making events, which is essentially what they became, because what we found in our investigation was that the chief and his command staff would then get this comp time and use that to take vacations, which then allowed them at the end of each year to cash in their vacation time for money. And we were talking thousands and thousands of dollars every year that they were cashing in, thanks to being able to give themselves comp time that they used to take vacations.
And so what we're talking about now, this comp time scandal, you revealed this around a year ago now. It was a big story. I mean, I think it opened a lot of people's eyes to how the fire department is operating right now. But what I'm curious about is how you did it, because in just a few months of myself looking into this, I've learned the fire department is not exactly the most transparent organization, and there's a lot of very complicated, very fraught politics within this department. So tell me about the process of just how did you uncover this?
Once I realized that there was something going on here and there were questions to be asked, a lot of it was accomplished through Open Records Act requests, which are legal requests seeking public information. So I sought out and I received timekeeping records for Chief Desmond Fulton and for his command staff. I asked for comp days that they had received and asked for. And it was just, pulling that thread and keep pulling that thread. And then I asked for more records and more records. And they showed what we eventually reported, which was that they were awarding themselves all this time, which, as we said, allowed them to then cash in vacation time at the end of each year. And what was really bothersome also to firefighters, Paul, was that they had specifically been told in no uncertain terms, you cannot do this. You are not allowed to do this. You cannot cash in vacation time for money because it's a budgetary issue.
Right.
They don't want to pay out money that they don't have to. They want it to be a soft cost. So they want them all to take their time so that there's nothing left at the end of the year that the city has to pay out for. And at the very same time in emails, when they were being told you absolutely cannot do this, we find out that their bosses are doing exactly what they told the troops they could not do.
Good enough for me, but not for thee, I guess was the message from the fire chief.
Exactly.
According to the reporting.
Yeah. And when there was a independent investigation commissioned by the city to look into this, done by a former U.S. attorney, he literally called this practice, one of the many things he called it was hypocritical. This angst and this friction with the city administration, really, from what I can tell, really started in 2023. And what happened was, after Mayor Johnston was inaugurated, he said, I'm going to have these anonymous surveys done of the public safety agencies, of the employees, police, fire, and sheriffs. And these were anonymous surveys. The fire department surveys that I was able to get my hands on were incredibly negative about their leadership. And this is dating back to 2023. And we tried to get those anonymous survey results, and the city administration, the Johnston administration, has refused to release them, saying these are privileged and confidential. Even though they're anonymous, even though these were done on city computer systems, even though this was all done at public expense, they made it clear they did not want these surveys about how firefighters felt about the fire department leadership to get out. We did get some. They were incredibly negative about the fire department leadership. So what happened after that? The mayor simply reappointed Chief Fulton. Nothing. And this really started the firefighters feeling like, God, he's not listening to us. Why did he ask us to do these surveys and pour our hearts out about our leadership and then just completely ignore it and move on as if nothing had happened? So that really put a burr under their saddle.
So that investigation you mentioned, they launched that after your reporting.
Correct.
And that was one of many responses I'm sure you got. I'd love to hear what you heard from Desmond Fulton, the fire chief, from the mayor, from the public. What happened next?
Well, as you can probably imagine, the fire chief isn't really all that thrilled with our reporting.
Did you ever actually talk to him about it?
The closest I came was before we ever did the first story on this. He agreed to sit down with me and just talk and have a cup of coffee and talk about it. And I was going to tell him, here's exactly what we have. And I think within about an hour of that meeting, he canceled it and said he wasn't going to be able to make it. Something else came up. And lots of emails, lots of text messages from me to him over the past year, trying to get him to talk to us, but he's never talked to us about this.
Interesting. I know in the wake of your reporting coming out, one of the things that we heard from the fire chief, or maybe it was from the mayor, you can tell me, but was that this practice of using comp time had been habitual in the department for many years.
Exactly. And that came out in the independent investigation. I think they said that this had been handed down from one chief to the next. It had morphed a little bit into the sort of the monster that it became, the comp time monster. But it had been going on for about a dozen years, according to that report. And that's one of the reasons that Mayor Johnston cited as to why he wasn't going to do anything about this. Chief Fulton is his appointee as fire chief. And all through this, Mayor Johnston has made it clear he's not going to do anything. He's not going to discipline Chief Fulton. And one of the reasons he said was, well, this was just a practice that had been handed down from chief to chief. So how could anybody have known this was not okay? Even though, it took about a 2-minute Google search for me to find out that this was illegal. And that was verified in that independent investigator's report when he also said this is illegal.
So here we're getting into some of the intrigue here. The mayor stands by the fire chief after this explosive reporting. Why might he do that? That's an interesting question.
Well, the chief was reappointed by Mayor Johnston in late 2023. And your question is a good one. Why would he stand by him? One reason is that, generally speaking, mayors want to stand by their own appointees. They just don't want to acknowledge or admit that maybe this wasn't the best move. So Mayor Johnston has been steadfast in standing by Fire Chief Fulton, no matter what's come up in this investigation. The most recent thing, of course, was the fire department voted, I think it was about 64% to 36%, that they had no confidence.
Right. Just a few weeks ago, in part in response to your reporting, you talked about this vote that they held, 64% no confidence. That seems like a really big deal.
It was a landslide. And that was really hard for firefighters to do, but it showed how strongly they felt about this issue and about their leadership by voting no confidence in Chief Fulton and his deputy chief. So it was a very strong message, and Mayor Johnston just kind of brushed it off and just said, I stand behind the chief, and let's move on.
Tell me a little bit more about that vote, because there was some, different arguments on either side. What would have been the case for firefighters? They're talking about this to say, let's vote yes. Let's say we have confidence in the chief after your reporting has already come out.
Yeah, it was really interesting because on one side, there was sort of a dollar and cents argument, which was that there's a cadre in the fire department who said, we can't do this. We can't vote no confidence because we have contract negotiations coming up. And if we vote no confidence in our fire chief, we're just going to piss off the mayor and we're going to get a crappier contract. And that's a pretty compelling argument, particularly for the younger firefighters who have longer careers in front of them. And whether they get a 2% increase or a 4% increase at this point in their careers is a really big deal. So that was the main argument. But on the other side was just the principled argument. A lot of firefighters just said, we have values and we have principles, and this is about integrity. And they felt very strongly that if any of them had done what the chief and his command staff had done with respect to comp time, they said we'd be fired. This would not be a coin flip. We would be fired. Yet here is the leader of our department not being disciplined, not suffering any meaningful consequences, aside from the mayor asked him to pay back some of the cashed out vacation
Only
time.
some?
Some, yeah. Only since Mayor Johnston had been in office.
Oh, okay.
So not even going back any further than that.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the firefighters just so like, that is not what would happen to us. We would get fired. But double standard was their position. They felt like this is a double standard and that they had to speak out against it. And that's really what led to that no confidence vote in Chief Fulton.
This episode is brought to you by bookshop.org. Whether you're searching for an incisive book that helps you make sense of this moment, a novel that sweeps you away, or a perfect spring break read, bookshop.org has you covered. When you shop at bookshop.org, you can choose an independent bookstore right here in Denver to support directly with your purchase. Just pick your fave. Feel good about buying books online with bookshop.org. You'll know that your money is supporting your local community, and you'll be helping indie bookstores continue to foster culture, curiosity, and a love of reading for generations to come. Use code CityCast now to get 15% off your next order at bookshop.org.
Well, I have been reading the Kathleen Hanna autobiography, and the section about her relationship with Kurt Cobain was like so sweet and so poignant.
It just like made me so happy. I didn't hear the whole story of their friendship before that book, and it was really lovely to read. But it is a really sad book, and I'm having to read it in sections because it's brutal. But it's beautiful. And check our show notes to find bookshop.org's bookstore map, and don't forget the code CityCast for a bangin' discount. Just waiting to get to the part where she marries Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys. Amazing.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistant's assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
These politics are fascinating, I have to say, because the fire department, the rank and file guys, like, you can't say, hey, fire my boss. Like, that's not how their fire department would, or their fire chief would lose his job. It's the mayor's job. The mayor gets to appoint. So that just these like, and then the union is an element in here that's interesting. And then it's all these sort of like different stakeholders and different forces pushing against these people that do this like really important service in the city. And anyway, there was one line. So the mayor wrote a letter responding to this vote of no confidence. 64% of the firefighters who voted in this election said no confidence in our chief, basically saying, Mayor Johnston, please fire this guy so we can get someone new. And then Mayor Johnston says, no, but the one line I want to ask you about in his letter explaining this was, quote, Chief Fulton has been a critical advocate for making sure our fire department looks like the community it serves, which is not always popular, but it is right.
Yeah, and that line in that letter really angered the firefighters because they felt like he was somehow suggesting that they were opposed to diversity. And that's not the message that I get from firefighters. They feel like, hey, if someone's qualified to be on the job, they should be on the job. So that really rankled the firefighters, that line. And they felt like that came out of left field too.
Really? Did they not have any inkling of what this was about?
The firefighters, no, they didn't see any linkage between Chief Fulton and the mayor pushing for diversity and the no confidence vote. They just didn't see it.
Do you see it?
I really don't. I mean, that's why to them, it seemed like kind of a red herring. Like, what are you talking about? How are you linking? We're saying we have no confidence in the fire chief due to his leadership for a lot of reasons. Diversity wasn't one of them. That never came up in any conversations that I heard. So that really, I think, came out of left field for a lot of them. And in fact, I've talked to some minority firefighters who felt that way about it. They said, what is that all about?
Interesting. Because I talked to a firefighter myself last week, and he told me exactly what this was about. He said that Chief Desmond Fulton has made a priority of maintaining the diversity of the department such that it reflects the diversity of the city, which is a nice thing to say. But specifically what that means is that there are these quotas. There's these numbers. You want the fire department to have a certain percentage of white firefighters, of black firefighters, because the city has a certain percentage of white people and black people. And that this person was telling me that creates this situation where hiring becomes difficult because you want to hit your numbers, but you don't want to compromise on your standards. So it becomes like, are we looking far enough afield for the right people? Are we trying to hire people from certain communities? How do we do that outreach? So that was my understanding of what the tension was within the department, was this tension around quotas and fitness standards. Have you heard anything about that from the people you're talking to?
It's worth noting historically that this issue about minorities and women being underrepresented in the fire service in Denver, this has been going on for decades, this question.
Really?
Yeah. And each chief that has come through has tried to bring the fire service here more into a place where it does look more like the community, to bring up the numbers of minorities represented, to bring up the number of women. And so it's always been tension around that. And yeah, I mean, I've heard some griping over the years. I mean, not just recently, but that standards were relaxed to get people into the fire department who might not otherwise get in. So I think it's an issue, but I think that the firefighters still were really surprised that that was cited by Mayor Johnston as being why he wanted Desmond Fulton to continue as fire chief in his response to the firefighters voting no confidence.
Let me ask you about something that's like a really big picture question. This is why I got interested in the fire department in the first place, is because I read this article like a year ago that pointed out the fact that across the country, fire department budgets have tended to be increasing year over year for a long time, probably like 50 years. Meanwhile, we've gotten better at building buildings, and they're not as flammable. They don't catch on fire as much. So the budgets are going up while the fire calls are going down. I wonder how you might put this recent tension inside the Denver Fire Department in that broader context.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, thanks to fire codes, thanks to sprinkler systems in high-rise buildings, thanks to smoke alarms, the number of fires has just historically been going down. And you mentioned how budgets have still been going up, which is an interesting balancing act. If you're a fire department and there are fewer fires happening that you have to put out, you know, why are we spending more on the fire department, more personnel, more engines, and so on and so forth? So this is a trend that we've been seeing for a long time. I don't know that there's really any nexus between that and what we've seen with the leadership in the fire department and the rank and file. I don't, that's really a political issue.
Yeah.
That's an issue of, how do you, as a leader of a fire department, keep your budget up, make sure you don't have to lay people off? But I think that the Denver Fire Department has been pretty successful in not laying people off. But they're feeling a squeeze. I mean, I hear quite often from firefighters about we have so many engines that are sidelined now that we can't fix. Training is not what it used to be in terms of some of the tools that we might want in our training academy and things like that. So there's still a budget squeeze. And that goes back to why the fire department command staff told rank and file firefighters, you can't cash in your vacation time because it would cost us. But at the same time, they're doing it on the other side.
Well, I have some speculation about this personally.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
Since we talked, I pulled the numbers. I got the data from the fire department going back 20 years. I got their budgets and I got the number of calls that they've gone on every year, and I've compared them a little bit.
Yeah. What'd you find?
What I found, the Denver Fire Department bucks the trend. We have not had this huge divergent budget going up while number of calls going down. That's not happening here, which I thought was great, pretty good data for the city to see. But the interesting thing was the ratio between calls for fires and calls for other things, because that percentage is really, really out of whack. Like the number of calls for fires that the fire department serves over the last 20 years, it's like 1 to 3% per year.
And let me stop you for one sec. What you have to remember too about that is a fire can be literally somebody whose stovetop caught fire and they call the fire department. So it may not be what the public thinks of as a big fire,
not
but
like a big apartment, like catching a big blaze.
Right. It literally burning food is categorized as a fire. So that could be part of those numbers too, which might make it even more dramatic.
Even smaller. I thought that was so shocking that the fire department, what they do, 1% of the calls or less often are fire related. It just made me think about the argument about the fitness standards and the safety of these crews, like maintaining these fitness standards. Like if 1% of these calls are for fires versus non-fires, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, I mean, they respond on car accidents. They go on medical calls. They go to alarms. I mean, there's a lot of false alarms. So they go to everything. And, you know, as I've kind of characterized it, it's an expensive insurance policy, but it's one that, you know, if we call 911, if our house is really on fire, we want and we expect them to show up quickly, and they do in Denver. But not for fires very often. But when that does happen, you want them to be there, and they will be there. I mean, Denver Fire Department does really well. And they're a highly respected organization. The rank and file are really appreciated by the public and the community. So they show up. Yeah, it's a lot of money, not a lot of fires anymore. But there used to be a saying that the fire department had. I don't know if they're still using it, but it started years and years ago. I remember under Rich Gonzalez, a former fire chief, and it was on the side of a lot of the trucks. It said seeking opportunities to serve. And I always felt like that was because the trend was there weren't as many opportunities to put out fires, but there are a lot of other opportunities to serve the community. So that was their motto for a while. I don't know if it is anymore, but it was seeking opportunities to serve.
That is really interesting. Well, that's what I'm going to be watching for next. I think my questions are like, what are the fitness standards for what? Like, what kinds of calls are we talking about? What kinds of services is this department providing? Because I think these dynamics are like, I mean, it's very opaque to me, I think, still. This whole thing. You've done excellent work reporting into it, but I still have questions. What are you watching next? I mean, you talked about the collective bargaining coming up soon. That's at the end of the month, right? I think they're negotiating right now. What do you expect to see?
Negotiations for a new collective bargaining agreement go on this year. For next year, typically, I think these are 3-year contracts. You know, they always get something worked out. I mean, the city will say it doesn't have any money, standard negotiation. The firefighters will say, yes, you do. And they'll get something hammered out at some point. What it's going to look like, I don't know. But the firefighters, they're not over all this by any means. They are still not just hurt, but angry and frustrated that the mayor, in their view, isn't listening to them, isn't listening to their concerns about the leadership of the fire department. So I don't think they're done yet. They're ticked.
Brian Moss, thanks so much for joining me.
Paul, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We want to hear from you too, especially if you work inside the fire department. What do you think about the mayor's support for the fire chief and the tension inside the department? Seriously, if you have experienced this inside Denver Fire or you know someone who has, please reach out. Leave us a voicemail or send us a text at 720-500-5418. That number again is 720-500-5418. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell Fire Chief Desmond Fulton about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you then.